It's such a weird time in the markets right now. You have investors from all over the world here again in New York, but there's a recession on the horizon potentially. You have Steve Cohen saying he's bullish anyways. How do people feel about putting money to work right now?
Well, I think there's a constructive optimism. We have several sovereign wealth funds here today, so we counted just under $2 trillion of capital in this room that we're talking from. Constructive optimism. Mark Lasry also from this stage this morning agreed with Steve. He feels like the inflation numbers are trending down. Joe Dowling was here talking about the 265 private portfolio companies at Blackstone, looking at their data. Economy is strong, the businesses are resilient, but the inflation numbers are trending down. So I think that's good news for us. I think it leads to positive action from the Fed again. Hopefully by the middle of the third quarter, we'll see some rate cuts.
How do you even look through that when you have the debt ceiling dispute going on in Washington that's causing so much anxiety among investors?
Well, you have to look through it because you don't really have a choice. I mean, if they pull the same brinksmanship that they did in 2011 and they go over the line and they start canceling payments or suspending payments, I think it's going to be very difficult for the U.S. I think it's a different time for the United States, 2023 versus 2011. And let's just go to Secretary Yellen's comments about weaponizing the dollar and some of the impact, the deleterious impact that that's had on the dollar as a world's reserve currency. So I hope our public officials are smart enough. I get the posturing and the peacocking, but I hope they're smart enough not to go over the line. And of course, if they don't, I think that will be positive for the markets.
Yeah, Anthony Romaine here, and yeah, hopefully they do find some sort of compromise. Once we do get to that point, let's just assume we actually make it out of this crisis alive here. There's still a lot of concerns about economic conditions, about interest rates, and I'm curious as to whether you're hearing from folks in the investment community specifically any sort of pullback, any sort of retrenchment in the idea here that there's just not going to be enough of a cushion there to take the risk that they would normally take.
Well, I think you're seeing that. I think you're seeing that in the markets. That's the tug of war that's taking place right now between, let's say, the Steve Cohens and the Mark Lasrys that are bullish and optimistic. Paul Tudor Jones made references to bullishness earlier part of the week. And then you've got people that are super concerned about all the things that you're just mentioning. And so that's the tug of war. Just taking a seismic look at it right now, the bears are winning. But if somebody like Steve or Mark happen to be right, I think you could see the markets move up fairly quickly if we get some relief or guidance on the debt ceiling and some relief or guidance on interest rates.
Well, caught in the middle of that, of course, are investors and LPs who might be sort of trying to trail the optimism that we've been hearing out of folks like a Steve Cohen or a Mark Lasry. At some point, they've also got to convince people that that optimism is real and is investable. How do you deal with investors right now who are a little skittish, who maybe want their money back, who says, I just don't want to go along for this ride right now?
Well, it depends on what they signed up for. You know, I think one of the problems that we all have in the money management business is conditioning investors for long-term thinking. I've said this often, but I'll repeat it here. Everyone's a long-term investor until they have short-term losses. But if you look at Joe Dowling's career, Steve Cohen's career, my own career, staying long, being patient, and conditioning yourself for some of the downturns has worked out well. And so in the case of Skybridge, when you signed up with Skybridge, there was an understanding that pursuant to what's happening in the market environment, the GP alongside of the board can make decisions related to things like tender offerings and what the size can be. And so you've seen cutbacks in tenders from places like a Blackstone or places like Skybridge because of the market environment. And so you have to remember, what people sign up for when they read the prospectus, they should look at it carefully. And we followed the letter of the guidelines inside of our prospectus, as many other investment managers have. And I think investors are rewarded. I'm not allowed to give out my performance on the air for whatever regulatory reasons, but I can say to you that this has been the best 4.5 months for Skybridge since 2012. And so we're off to a great start this year. We're ahead of our benchmarks, and I think the people that are staying with us are being rewarded.
What about a pivot here? Is Skybridge looking to capitalize on something new, given what had happened to crypto, what had happened with the tour with FTX here into the end of last year? I know Bitcoin is up this year, but it's kind of flatlined, more recently. Do you stick with it?
Well, I'm sticking with it. It's interesting. I haven't changed the portfolio at all, and I think we've been rewarded by that because a lot of things happened last year. You're mentioning the Sam Bankman-Fried thing, but it was almost like if John Merriweather and Bernie Madoff had a baby, it was Sam Bankman-Fried. You got everything in that story. You got fraud, you got over leverage, you got excess confidence, and it caused a really big depression in the markets, and the markets probably overshot to the downside. And so we think intrinsically Bitcoin's worth about $40,000. It's trending right now 25 to 27. But what we do see is better miner activity. We see wallet expansion. You and I have talked about this off the air, so let's repeat it. You have 4% global absorption for Bitcoin, about 340 million wallets. That's roughly where the internet was in 1998. We just have to get from 4 to 8%, and you'll see explosive returns in Bitcoin. So I want people to be patient, but I get it. It's a great news story, great media story that it's not doing well right now, but I think this is where the rubber meets the road. And I'm hoping you guys will invite me back if I'm right, because it's fun to dunk people when they're wrong, but if I'm right on this, I want you to invite me back.
One more question about FTX and Skybridge. Where do you stand in terms of buying your stake back? And would you bring in another investor at this point?
Well, I would like Skybridge and our current equity owners to just buy the stake back. We have to wait for the bankruptcy liquidators and the bankruptcy trustees to decide when they want to negotiate with us. But I'm confident that we're going to get it. There are many reasons for that, but the main ones are there's no economic tie to that ownership. There's no preference rights to that ownership. And we have blocking rights on a transfer. So I'd like to think that it will conclude favorably for us. But it hasn't really affected our order of operations. It certainly hasn't affected our management decisions. And so we can operate with it as it currently stands, but I would definitely like to get the piece back, and we'll see what happens. It's probably not going to happen anytime soon, Sonali. I don't know if you've noticed, but the bankruptcy guys, they like taking their time, and there seems to be a little bit of a motivation for them to take their time.